Montana Territory, 1878. The dust from the eastbound stagecoach had barely settled when Quinn Yates spotted her stepping down, one hand clutching a modest carpetbag, the other holding her bonnet against the persistent prairie wind. Even from across the yard, he could tell she was out of place at Broken Spoke Ranch, her posture too proper, her traveling dress too fine despite the wrinkles of a long journey. This had to be her, the sister Hank had mentioned in his letters before typhoid fever took him last winter. Quinn wiped his palms on his denim trousers and adjusted his battered hat, suddenly conscious of the hoarse smell that clung to him after a morning breaking new Mustangs. At 24, he'd been working as a ranch hand for the Hendersons long enough to earn the respect of the older men, but not so long that the work had bent his back or leathered his skin beyond his years. The April sun had already brought out the gold highlights in his brown hair, and a 3-day stubble shadowed his jaw. She stood beside her single bag, scanning the ranch yard with uncertainty in her eyes. Quinn crossed the distance between them in long strides. "Miss Banning," he asked, removing his hat. "You must be Emma." Her eyes, a startling shade of blue that reminded him of the mountain lakes, widened with surprise. "Yes, I'm Emma Banning. How did your brother described you?" Quinn extended his hand, then awkwardly withdrew it, remembering his manners. "I'm Quinn Yates. I worked alongside Hank. I'm sorry for your loss, miss." The mention of her brother brought a shadow across her face. At perhaps 20 years old, Emma Banning was pretty in a way that spoke of eastern parlors and pianoforte lessons, not the harsh Montana wilderness. Her chestnut hair was swept into a simple but elegant knot at the nape of her neck, and her traveling dress, though plain navy wool, had clearly been sewn by a skilled hand. "Thank you, Mr. Yates," she said, her voice steady despite the grief etched in the corners of her mouth. "I've come to collect my brother's belongings. The ranch owner, Mr. Henderson, I believe, was kind enough to offer me lodging while I settle Hank's affairs." Quinn nodded, reaching for her bag. "Mrs. Henderson has prepared the foreman's cabin for you. It's small but private." He hesitated. "If you don't mind my asking, did you travel all this way alone, Miss Banning?" A flash of something, pride or perhaps desperation, crossed her face. "I had little choice in the matter, Mr. Yates. My position as a schoolteacher in Boston became untenable after certain changes in circumstances. When I received word of Hank's passing, I decided a fresh start might be what Providence intended." Quinn sensed there was more to her story than she was telling, but he merely nodded and gestured toward the cluster of buildings that made up the ranch headquarters. "The main house is just up ahead. Mrs. Henderson will want to meet you." As they walked, Emma took in the sprawling ranch, the horse corrals, the bunkhouse, the distant cattle grazing on the spring grass beneath the towering mountains. Quinn watched her face, wondering what she saw in this rough country after the refinement of Boston. "It's beautiful," she murmured, surprising him. Hank's letters describe the mountains, but words hardly do them justice. "Most Easterners find it too wild," Quinn replied. Her chin lifted slightly. "I'm not most Easterners, Mr. Yates." Quinn couldn't help but smile. Perhaps there was more of Hank in her than first appeared. At the main house, Clara Henderson, a stout, practical woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and capable hands, greeted Emma warmly. "You poor dear, traveling all this way. Come in, come in. I've got coffee brewing and biscuits just out of the oven." She ushered Emma inside with motherly efficiency while Quinn lingered awkwardly on the porch. "Yates," Mrs. Henderson called over her shoulder. "Show Miss Banning to the foreman's cabin after she's had something to eat. And tell Roberts I need him to fetch those crates of Hank's belongings from the storage shed." Quinn nodded and retreated, unsettled by the strange hollow feeling in his chest as he watched Emma disappear into the house. He had no business feeling anything about Hank's sister. She'd collect her brother's things, perhaps stay a week or two, then return to civilization where she belonged. But as he strode back to the breaking pen, he couldn't shake the image of those blue eyes scanning the horizon, or the quiet way she'd said, "I'm not most Easterners." Emma sat stiffly at Clara Henderson's kitchen table, the untouched coffee cooling before her. Through the window, she could see men moving about the ranch yard, working, living, existing in a world her brother had inhabited but that remained utterly foreign to her. "Eat, child," Mrs. Henderson urged, pushing a plate of biscuits toward her. "The journey from Boston is long enough to hollow out anyone." "Thank you for your hospitality," Emma said, taking a small bite to be polite. "It's more than I expected." Mrs. Henderson's kind face softened. "Your brother was well liked here. A hard worker and honest to a fault." We all felt his loss keenly. Emma swallowed against the tightness in her throat. "I hadn't seen him in 3 years. Our parents passed within months of each other in '75, and Hank decided to seek his fortune out west. I stayed in Boston to finish my education." She didn't mention the scandal that had cost her teaching position or the whispered rumors that had followed her through the streets of Boston. Rumors born not of any impropriety on her part, but from the vindictive lies of the school headmaster's son when she'd refused his unwanted advances. "And now," Mrs. Henderson asked gently, "what brings you all this way when a letter might have sufficed to settle Hank's affairs?" Emma met the older woman's gaze directly. "I have nothing left in Boston, Mrs. Henderson. No family, no position, and frankly, no prospects. When I learned of Hank's passing, I realized I could use what little money I had saved to either subsist in diminished circumstances in Boston or seek something new." She took a steadying breath. "I came with nothing but hope, really. Hope that perhaps I might find work here, maybe as a teacher if the settlement needs one." Mrs. Henderson studied her for a long moment. "There's no proper school yet in these parts, though there's talk of building one come fall. But children there are, scattered across ranches and homesteads, growing up wild as weeds with precious little learning." A spark of possibility warmed Emma's chest. "Then perhaps there's a place for me after all." The ranch wife's weathered face creased in a smile. "Perhaps there is. For now, you're welcome to stay as long as you need. The foreman's cabin is empty since Mr. Donnelly moved to Idaho Territory last month." She paused, her expression growing serious. "But I should warn you, this isn't Boston. Life out here is harsh, especially for a woman alone." "I'm stronger than I appear," Emma replied, lifting her chin. Mrs. Henderson laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "I believe you are. You have the same look your brother had when he first arrived, half terrified but too stubborn to admit it." She rose from the table. "Now, let's get you settled. Quinn will show you to your cabin." As they stepped onto the porch, Emma saw the young ranch hand from earlier leading a magnificent chestnut stallion across the yard. Even from a distance, she could see the confident ease with which he handled the powerful animal. There was something compelling about Quinn Yates, a quiet strength that reminded her of her brother. "That boy's got away with horses like I've never seen," Mrs. Henderson remarked, following Emma's gaze. "Came to us 3 years ago, barely more than a boy himself, but he's worked his way up to our best bronc buster. Your brother and he were thick as thieves." Emma felt a pang of loss. This man had known her brother's daily life, his work, his dreams, while she had only letters written months apart. "Mr. Yates mentioned he worked with Hank," she said quietly. Mrs. Henderson nodded. "They shared the west bunkhouse. It was Quinn who found him when the fever took a bad turn." She sighed heavily. "Quinn sat with him through that last night. Said Hank talked about you right to the end. Worried who would look after his little sister if anything happened to him." Tears pricked at Emma's eyes. She blinked them back, unwilling to break down in front of this woman who had shown her such kindness. Mrs. Henderson mercifully changed the subject. "Quinn," she called across the yard, "come show Miss Banning to her cabin when you've finished with that hellion." Quinn raised a hand in acknowledgement, and Emma found herself both dreading and anticipating his company. Here was someone who knew her brother in ways she never had, a living connection to the man Hank had become in this wild country. But that connection was also a reminder of all she'd lost. As Quinn approached, leading the now docile stallion, Emma couldn't help but notice the grace in his movements. The Eastern gentleman of her acquaintance affected a studied elegance, but Quinn's was natural, born of physical work and harmony with the powerful animals he trained. "I'll see to your bags, Miss Banning," he said, his voice low and pleasant. Their eyes met briefly, and Emma felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. She quickly looked away, reminding herself that she had come to Montana Territory with one purpose: to build a new life from the ashes of her old one. Handsome ranch hands, no matter how kind, had no place in those plans. But as Quinn lifted her carpetbag with ease, she couldn't help wondering what her brother had told this man about her, and whether Hank would have approved of the strange awareness that seemed to spark between them. Quinn closed the door of the foreman's cabin behind him, leaving Emma Banning to settle in. The small structure was simple but sound. a main room with a stone fireplace, a separate bedroom, and a lean-to kitchen. It was modest by Eastern standards, he imagined, but palatial compared to the cramped bunkhouse he shared with 5 other men. As he crossed the yard, his thoughts kept circling back to those blue eyes and the quiet dignity with which she carried herself. There was a story there, something more than grief for a brother or the natural uncertainty of finding herself in a strange place. He'd seen it in the careful way she spoke, as if measuring each word. How's she settling in? Jack Roberts, the aging ranch foreman, fell into step beside him. At 60, Roberts had been working cattle since before the war, his leathery face a map of sun exposure and hard living. Well enough, I reckon, Quinn replied. Mrs. Henderson asked if you could bring Hank's things from storage. Roberts nodded. Poor girl, coming all this way. What's she planning to do out here? Can't imagine she'll stay long. The thought of Emma leaving so soon caused an unexpected twinge in Quinn's chest. She mentioned something about teaching. Roberts snorted. Teaching? Out here? The nearest school's in Helena, and that's 40 miles if it's an inch. There are children enough scattered about, Quinn argued, surprising himself with his defensiveness. The Wilsons have 4, the Caldwells 3. Even the Hendersons' grandchildren are growing up wild as rabbits when they visit. The older man studied Quinn with shrewd eyes. You sound mighty concerned for someone you just met. Quinn felt heat creep up his neck. She's Hank's sister. I figure we owe it to him to look out for her. Roberts hummed knowingly. Well, you can look out for her all you want, but that girl's got Boston written all over her. She won't last a month when winter comes. Quinn watched as Roberts ambled away, irritation prickling under his skin. The foreman was probably right. What would a Boston schoolteacher want with Montana territory once the novelty wore off? But he couldn't shake the memory of the determined set of Emma's jaw when she'd said, I'm not most Easterners. Later that evening, as Quinn sat on the bunkhouse steps cleaning his tack, he spotted Emma walking slowly around the ranch yard. The setting sun caught in her chestnut hair, unleashed now from its tight arrangement and falling in waves down her back. She moved with purpose, as if taking inventory of her surroundings. Without conscious decision, Quinn found himself on his feet, crossing toward her. Evening, Miss Banning. He called softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, the wariness in her expression softening slightly when she recognized him. Mr. Yates. I was just getting my bearings. It's a lot to take in, he acknowledged, falling into step beside her. Is the cabin comfortable enough? More than adequate, thank you. Mrs. Henderson has been very kind. She paused, then asked hesitantly, Would you show me where Hank is buried? I'd like to pay my respects. Quinn nodded, his throat suddenly tight. This way? It's not far. They walked in silence to a small fenced plot on a gentle rise overlooking the ranch. 5 wooden markers stood in neat rows, previous ranch hands, the Hendersons' infant daughter, and the most recent, a simple cross bearing the name Henry Banning, 1854 to 1878. Emma stood very still before her brother's grave, her profile etched against the golden sunset. Quinn moved back a respectful distance, but he couldn't look away from the quiet dignity in her bearing. No dramatic displays of grief, just the slight tremble of her clasped hands and the rigidity of her posture betraying the emotion she contained. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. Were you with him? At the end. Quinn stepped forward. I was. The fever came on sudden. We sent for the doctor from Helena, but he trailed off, remembering those final hours. Did he suffer much? Her voice was steady, though her eyes remained fixed on the marker. No, Quinn lied gently. It was peaceful at the last. He spoke of you. At this, she turned to him, eyes glistening in the fading light. What did he say? Quinn chose his words carefully. He was proud of you. Your education, your teaching. He kept every letter you sent. Read them to us sometimes on winter evenings. He hesitated, then added, he worried about you being alone. A single tear escaped, tracing a silvery path down her cheek. And now I'm here, and he's gone. Without thinking, Quinn reached out, lightly touching her arm. He'd be glad you came, even so. She didn't pull away from his touch. Instead, she looked up at him with those lake blue eyes. Thank you for being with him when I couldn't be. Something unspoken passed between them in that moment. A connection formed through shared grief for a man they had both loved in different ways. Quinn became acutely aware of his hand on her sleeve, of the diminishing space between them, of the inappropriate direction of his thoughts. He stepped back, clearing his throat. It'll be dark soon. We should head back. Emma nodded, composing herself. As they walked back toward the ranch buildings, now golden in the last rays of sunset, she asked, "Would you tell me about him? About his life here? His letters were infrequent, and I feel I barely knew the man he became." Quinn smiled, grateful for the safe territory of memories. He was the best roper on the ranch. Could catch a calf at full gallop like it was standing still. And he had this laugh. You could hear it clear across the yard. As night fell over Broken Spoke Ranch, Quinn found himself sitting on the porch steps of the foreman's cabin, sharing stories of Hank Banning with his sister, tales of cattle drives and blizzards, of campfire songs and practical jokes. With each anecdote, Emma's reserve melted a little more, until she was laughing through tears at the story of how Hank had once accidentally locked himself in the smokehouse overnight. That sounds exactly like him, she smiled. Even as a boy, he was always in some predicament. In the silver moonlight, with her hair loose around her shoulders and animation lighting her face, Emma Banning looked less like the prim schoolteacher and more like a woman who might belong in this wild country after all. Quinn found himself wondering what it would be like to see that smile directed at him for reasons that had nothing to do with her brother. As if sensing the direction of his thoughts, Emma's expression sobered. "It's late. I've kept you from your rest, and I'm sure your duties start early." Quinn stood reluctantly. "Before sunrise. But I don't mind." She rose as well, suddenly formal again. "Thank you for the stories, Mr. Yates. They help." "Emma," she replied softly. "My friends call me Emma." As Quinn walked back to the bunkhouse, the weight of Hank's death seemed lighter somehow, replaced by a new feeling he wasn't ready to name. Emma Banning had come to Montana with nothing but hope, and perhaps that was enough to start with. What he didn't see was the way Emma watched him go, one hand pressed against the hollow of her throat, wondering what her brother would think of the unexpected flutter in her heart. The first light of dawn found Emma already awake, staring at the rough-hewn ceiling of the foreman's cabin. Sleep had been elusive, her mind filled with Quinn's stories of Hank, and if she was honest with herself, filled with thoughts of Quinn himself. There was something disarming about the young ranch hand's quiet strength and the gentle way he'd spoken of her brother. She rose and dressed in one of her plainer dresses, a sensible brown cotton that wouldn't show dust. If she was to make a place for herself here, she needed to understand this world that had claimed her brother's heart. Today, she would begin. Outside, the ranch was already alive with activity. Cowboys moved between the barn and corrals, voices calling instructions and good-natured ribbing floating on the crisp morning air. Emma spotted Quinn by the largest corral, his lean form instantly recognizable even at a distance. He was working with the chestnut stallion from yesterday, moving in a kind of dance with the powerful animal. She found herself drawn toward the corral, maintaining a respectful distance as she watched. Quinn moved with confident precision, speaking too softly for her to hear the words, but the tone carried. Reassuring, firm, patient. The stallion, which had seemed so wild yesterday, responded to his subtle cues with increasing trust. "He's got the touch, that one," came a gravelly voice beside her. Emma turned to find an older man with a weathered face and silver-streaked hair watching the scene with knowing eyes. "Mr. Roberts." He introduced himself with a tip of his hat. "Ranch foreman. You must be Hank's sister." "Emma Banning," she confirmed, offering her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Roberts." His handshake was firm but brief. "Brought your brother's things. They're in a crate on your porch." He nodded toward Quinn and the stallion. "That horse threw 3 men before Quinn took him on. Killed a man over at the Circling J last year. But look at him now, settling like he's been gentled for years." Emma watched as Quinn smoothly swung onto the stallion's bare back. The horse tensed momentarily, then relaxed as Quinn ran a hand down its neck, murmuring something that made the animal's ears flick attentively. "How does he do it?" she asked, genuinely curious. Roberts chuckled. "Says he listens to what the horse is trying to tell him. Sounds like nonsense to most of the boys, but can't argue with results." He studied her with shrewd eyes. "Henderson says you're looking to teach." Emma nodded, grateful for the change of subject. "Yes, if there's opportunity. I was a schoolteacher in Boston. Might be. Families hereabouts are starting to worry about their young uns growing up without letters." But it won't be like Boston. No fancy schoolhouse, scattered students, hard winters. I'm prepared for challenges, Mr. Roberts. The foreman's weathered face creased in an unexpected smile. You sound like your brother. He was all determination, too, when he first showed up. City soft, but stubborn as a mule. His expression sobered. I'll speak to Henderson about arranging meetings with some of the local families. Can't promise anything, mind. I would appreciate that greatly, Emma said, warmth spreading through her chest at this first real possibility. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats. Quinn was guiding the chestnut stallion toward them at an easy lope. Up close, the transformation in the animal was even more remarkable, still proud and powerful, but calm under Quinn's guidance. Morning, Miss Banning, Quinn called, his face lighting with a smile that did strange things to Emma's composure. His brown hair was tousled from the ride, his chambray shirt open at the collar revealing sun-browned skin. At perhaps 25, he had the vitality of youth combined with the quiet confidence of a man who knew his worth. Good morning, she replied, hoping her voice betrayed none of her awareness. Mr. Roberts was just telling me about your gift with horses. Quinn dismounted in a fluid motion. Firecracker here just needed someone to listen to him. He patted the stallion's glossy neck. Most men try to break a horse's spirit. I find it works better to convince them we're on the same side. There was something in the way he spoke of the horses, a genuine respect, that touched Emma deeply. In Boston, animals were largely utilitarian, beasts of burden to be commanded. Quinn's approach spoke of partnership. I brought your brother's things, Roberts said, breaking the moment. Quinn can help you go through them if you need. Emma nodded. Thank you. I'd appreciate the assistance. Roberts excused himself, leaving Emma suddenly alone with Quinn and the magnificent stallion. She reached out hesitantly toward the horse. May I? She asked. Quinn's eyes warmed. Of course. Hold your hand flat. Let him come to you. She did as instructed, her breath catching as the stallion's velvet muzzle brushed her palm in gentle exploration. He likes you, Quinn said softly, and Emma couldn't help but wonder if there was more meaning in those simple words than either of them was ready to acknowledge. The stallion nickered softly, and Quinn laughed. Looks like I've been replaced as his favorite. Emma smiled, stroking the horse's forehead. What's his story? How did such a magnificent animal end up here? Quinn's expression darkened slightly. He was mistreated. Henderson bought him at auction last month. Previous owner had beaten him bloody, trying to break his spirit. Most thought he was too dangerous to salvage. Emma's hand stilled on the stallion's neck. And you disagreed. I recognized something in him, Quinn said quietly. He wasn't mean, just hurt and afraid. Sometimes what looks like wildness is just fear wearing a different coat. Their eyes met over the horse's neck, and Emma felt as though Quinn could see straight through to the fears she kept carefully hidden. The whispered rumors that had followed her through Boston's streets, the humiliation of being dismissed from her teaching position based on a spurned suitor's lies, the terror of arriving alone in this wilderness with nothing but hope to sustain her. You understand him, she said, meaning the horse, but wondering if Quinn heard the deeper recognition in her voice. He nodded slowly. Sometimes it's easier to understand animals than people. They don't hide their feelings behind words. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken understanding, until the breakfast bell rang from the main house, breaking the spell. Quinn cleared his throat. I should get Firecracker settled. Then I can help you with that crate, if you still want. I'd like that, Emma said, stepping back from the horse. Thank you, Quinn. As she walked back toward her cabin, Emma felt Quinn's gaze following her. She straightened her shoulders, fighting the urge to look back. She had come to Montana Territory to build a new life, not to lose her heart to a ranch hand, no matter how kind his eyes or how gentle his hands. But as she climbed the steps to her porch and saw the wooden crate containing all that remained of her brother's life, Emma couldn't deny the comfort of knowing Quinn would soon be beside her, helping her face whatever memories the crate contained. The crate sat between them on the cabin floor, its contents spread in careful piles, clothing, a few books, letters tied with string, a silver pocket watch that had belonged to their father. Quinn watched as Emma handled each item reverently, occasionally pausing to share a memory or ask a question. He kept it, she said softly, holding up a small, carved wooden horse. I made this for his 16th birthday. It's terrible, She laughed through sudden tears. The legs aren't even the same length. Quinn smiled. He kept it on the shelf above his bunk. Used to say his little sister was going to be a famous sculptor someday. Emma shook her head, running her finger along the crude carving. I had forgotten this. How strange to think it traveled all this way with him. As they worked through the crate, Quinn found himself increasingly drawn to the woman beside him. Emma Banning was a study in contrasts, educated and refined, yet practical, vulnerable in her grief, yet displaying a core of strength that reminded him powerfully of her brother. When she smiled, which was happening more frequently as they uncovered happy memories among Hank's possessions, her whole face transformed. "What's this?" Emma asked, withdrawing a folded document from between the pages of a book. Quinn leaned closer. "Looks like a deed." Emma unfolded the paper carefully. "It is. For a parcel of land north of here." She scanned the document, her eyes widening. "Quinn, did you know Hank owned land?" He shook his head, genuinely surprised. "No, he never mentioned it." "Are you sure?" "It's all here, 160 acres along Wolf Creek. Purchased 8 months ago." She looked up at him, bewildered. Why wouldn't he have told anyone? Quinn took the deed, examining it. "It's legitimate. Must have used his savings." He frowned thoughtfully. "Wolf Creek is good land. Water year-round, sheltered valley, decent grazing. He must have been planning to start his own place eventually. And now it's mine," Emma said softly, the realization dawning in her eyes. "I own land in Montana Territory." The implications hung in the air between them. With land of her own, Emma had more than just hoped to sustain her new beginning. She had a foundation upon which to build. "Have you seen it?" she asked. "This land?" Quinn nodded slowly. "Passed through that valley on cattle drives. It's about 15 miles north of here. Beautiful country. I want to see it," Emma declared, a new determination lighting her face. "Will you take me?" The request caught Quinn off guard. "It's not a simple afternoon ride, Miss Banning. We'd need provisions, proper horses." "Emma," she corrected gently, "and I understand that. But I need to see what Hank saw in this place, what he was working toward." Her blue eyes held his. "Please, Quinn. How could he refuse her? I'll speak with Henderson about taking a few days. We could ride out day after tomorrow, camp overnight, and return the following evening." Her smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Thank you. This means more than I can express." Quinn found himself returning her smile, even as a voice of caution whispered in the back of his mind. 2 days alone in the wilderness with Emma Banning was dangerous territory, not because of wolves or weather, but because of the growing attraction he could no longer deny. Hank had been his friend, and Emma was Hank's sister, newly grieving and vulnerable. The honorable path was clear. But as Emma carefully folded the deed and tucked it into her pocket, Quinn knew he would take her to see her brother's dream, regardless of the risk to his heart. "Absolutely not," Clara Henderson declared, her hands on her hips as she faced Emma across the kitchen table. "A proper young lady cannot go gallivanting across the territory alone with a single man. It's simply not done." Emma had expected resistance, but the vehemence of Mrs. Henderson's opposition took her by surprise. "I understand your concern for propriety, Mrs. Henderson, but this is my brother's land, perhaps my future. I need to see it." "Then wait until Mr. Henderson can arrange a proper party to escort you. Roberts and his wife could accompany you, or perhaps Pastor Miller from Helena when he makes his monthly circuit." Emma tamped down her frustration. "The pastor isn't due for 3 weeks, and Mr. Roberts mentioned the cattle drive preparations will keep everyone occupied until then." She leaned forward earnestly. "Mrs. Henderson, I have the utmost respect for Quinn Yates. He was my brother's friend, and he's shown me nothing but kindness and respect." Mrs. Henderson's expression softened slightly. "It's not about Quinn's character, dear. It's about appearances. A woman's reputation is fragile out here, perhaps even more so than in Boston." The words struck uncomfortably close to home. Emma's hand trembled slightly as she set down her teacup. "I'm well aware of how quickly a reputation can be destroyed, Mrs. Henderson." She hadn't intended to reveal so much, but continued softly. "It's why I left Boston." The older woman's eyes sharpened with interest. "What happened?" Emma hesitated, then decided truth was her best ally. "I refused the advances of the school headmaster's son. In retaliation, he spread rumors questioning my virtue. Though completely false, they were enough to cost me my position and standing in the community." She met Mrs. Henderson's gaze directly. So you see, I understand the value of reputation. But I also understand that sometimes one must take risks to build a future. Clara Henderson studied her thoughtfully. You're much like your brother, determined to forge your own path. She sighed heavily. I cannot in good conscience approve of your plan, but… She paused, considering. What if you were to take Lily Roberts as well? She's Jack's niece, staying with them while her husband's working the mines in Virginia City. She's a sensible woman, about your age. Her presence would provide the necessary propriety. Relief flooded through Emma. That would be perfect. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. The ranch wife nodded, though concern still lingered in her eyes. Be careful, Emma. Not just of your reputation, but of your heart. Quinn Yates is a fine young man, but he's a ranch hand with no prospects beyond the wages Henderson pays him. Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. I assure you, Mrs. Henderson, my interest in visiting the property is purely practical. Of course it is, dear, Mrs. Henderson replied with knowing eyes that saw far too much. Now, let's see about arranging for Lily to join your expedition. 2 days later, as dawn broke over the eastern horizon, Emma found herself mounted on a gentle mare named Daisy, with Quinn on his bay gelding and Lily Roberts on a dappled gray. Their saddlebags were packed with provisions, bedrolls secured behind their saddles. Lily was a pleasant surprise, a cheerful, practical woman of 24 with wheat blonde hair and an easy manner. She'd taken to Emma immediately, expressing delight at the prospect of an adventure to break the monotony of ranch life. It'll be good to stretch Pepper's legs, she said, patting her mount's neck. And I've been dying for female company. These cowboys are fine men. But Lord, they can talk about cattle until your ears fall off. Quinn feigned offense. Some of us have other interests, Mrs. Roberts. Lily laughed. Yes, you talk about horses instead. Her eyes twinkled as she turned to Emma. Though lately, I've noticed Mr. Yates here has developed a sudden interest in education. Emma felt her cheeks warm as Quinn cleared his throat awkwardly. If we want to reach Wolf Creek by afternoon, we should get moving, he said, clearly eager to change the subject. As they rode north, the landscape opened before them, rolling grasslands giving way to pine-covered foothills, the distant mountains rising majestic against the sky. Emma found herself entranced by the changing scenery, so different from Boston's crowded streets and formal gardens. Quinn proved to be a knowledgeable guide, pointing out landmarks and naming wildflowers that dotted the spring meadows. He rode slightly ahead, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the horizon, occasionally turning to make sure Emma and Lily were managing well. He's a handsome one, Lily remarked quietly during one such moment, her voice low enough that only Emma could hear. Half the girls in the county have set their caps for him, but he barely notices. Emma pretended great interest in adjusting her riding gloves. He and my brother were close. I think he feels responsible for me because of that. Lily studied her shrewdly. Is that all it is? Before Emma could formulate a response that wouldn't reveal too much, Quinn called back to them. There's a good spot to rest the horses up ahead. We'll stop for a bit. They dismounted in a small clearing beside a bubbling creek. While Quinn tended to the horses, Lily and Emma spread a blanket on a patch of grass and unpacked some of Mrs. Henderson's bread and cold chicken. This country gets under your skin, Lily mused, gazing at the distant mountains. I remember when I first arrived from Pennsylvania 4 years ago. I thought I'd never get used to the emptiness, the wildness of it all. Now I can't imagine living anywhere else. Emma smiled. It's beautiful. Different than I expected. And what did you expect? Quinn asked, joining them on the blanket, his hat pushed back on his forehead. Emma considered. I'm not entirely sure. Hank's letters describe the landscape, but words can't capture the scale of it. How the land seems to go on forever, or the way the mountains change color with the light. Quinn's expression softened. It's not for everyone. Some find it too vast, too lonesome. And you? Emma asked, suddenly needing to know what held him here. He looked out toward the horizon, a small smile playing at his lips. For me, it's the freedom of it. Room to breathe, to become who you're meant to be without the weight of others' expectations. He glanced at her. Boston must feel very confined after even these few days here. It does, she admitted. Even before circumstances changed, I sometimes felt the walls closing in. So many rules, so many judgments. She took a deep breath of the clean, pine-scented air. Here, It's as if the land itself offers possibility. Something unspoken passed between them, a shared understanding that transcended their different backgrounds. For a moment, the rest of the world fell away, and Emma saw only the warmth in Quinn's eyes, felt only the strange flutter in her chest when he looked at her. Lily cleared her throat pointedly. We should probably continue if we want to reach your land before dark. The spell broken, Quinn rose quickly to his feet, extending a hand to help Emma up. The brief contact of his calloused palm against hers sent warmth spreading up her arm. She withdrew her hand perhaps too quickly, busying herself with folding the blanket while Quinn returned to the horses. Be careful, Emma, Lily murmured, echoing Mrs. Henderson's warning from days earlier. Emma nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She had come to Montana Territory with hope for a new beginning, not to lose her heart to a man who represented everything she'd been taught to avoid, a man without property, education, or position in society. Yet with every mile they traveled deeper into this wild country, the values she'd brought from Boston seemed increasingly irrelevant. As they mounted and continued their journey northward, Emma found herself watching Quinn's confident form ahead of them, wondering if she was truly seeing him, or merely the reflection of her own longing for the freedom he embodied. Wolf Creek Valley unfolded before them like a painting, a sweep of grassland cradled by gentle hills, bisected by the silver ribbon of the creek itself. Stands of aspen trembled in the afternoon breeze, their new spring leaves catching the light. In the distance, a small herd of deer grazed peacefully, raising their heads briefly at the travelers' approach before returning to their meal. This is it, Quinn said, reining his horse to a stop on a low rise. Hank's land, your land now. Emma sat motionless in the saddle, overcome by the beauty before her and the knowledge that this place had been her brother's dream. It's magnificent, she whispered. Beside her, Lily gave a low whistle of appreciation. Your brother chose well. Water, timber, good grazing, everything you'd need. Quinn dismounted, then moved to help Emma from her horse. His hands at her waist were strong and sure as he lifted her down, lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary. Their eyes met briefly before he stepped back, gesturing toward the valley. The property runs from that stand of aspens to the far ridge, and from the creek south to where we're standing. 160 acres, give or take. Emma turned slowly, trying to absorb the scope of it. What would he have done with it? Raised cattle? Quinn nodded. Probably. Maybe some horses too. He had a good eye for horseflesh. He hesitated, then added, There's a level spot near the creek that would be perfect for a house. Want to see it? They left Lily to rest with the horses and walked together down the gentle slope toward the creek. The late afternoon sun bathed everything in golden light, casting long shadows across the new grass. As they neared the water, Quinn pointed to a small plateau overlooking the creek. There, natural drainage, protected from the north wind by those hills, good view of the valley to watch for approaching riders or weather. He stopped, suddenly self-conscious. Not that you'd be building anything here. I just meant, it's perfect, Emma interrupted softly, standing on the spot where a home might have stood. She could almost see it, a sturdy cabin with windows facing the creek, perhaps a garden plot nearby, horses in a corral. Quinn stood beside her, hands in his pockets, watching her face. You could do it, you know. Build a life here. The simple statement sent a ripple of possibility through her. It would take resources I don't have, knowledge I don't possess. You'd learn. People here help each other. His voice dropped lower. I'd help you. Emma turned to face him, searching his expression. Why would you do that? For Hank, at first, he admitted, meeting her gaze directly. But now, he trailed off, unable or unwilling to complete the thought. Her heart quickened. Now, the air between them seemed to still, the only sound the gentle murmur of the creek and the distant call of a meadowlark. Quinn took a half-step closer, close enough that Emma could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from him. Emma, hello down there. Lily's voice called from the ridge. Sun's getting low. We should make camp before dark. The moment shattered. Quinn stepped back, his expression closing like a book snapped shut. She's right. We should get back. As they walked up the slope in silence, Emma's mind whirled with unasked questions. What had he been about to say? And more importantly, what would she have wanted to hear? They made camp in a sheltered spot near the creek, Quinn efficiently building a small fire, while Lily and Emma laid out bedrolls and prepared a simple meal from their provisions. As darkness fell, they sat around the campfire, the flames casting flickering shadows across their faces. "Tell me about Hank," Lily urged, passing Emma a cup of coffee. "Quinn always says he was the best rider on the ranch, but there must be more to him than that." Emma smiled, grateful for the invitation to speak of her brother. "He was always restless, even as a boy. Our father wanted him to enter the family business, textiles, but Hank couldn't bear the thought of being confined to an office." She traced the rim of her cup thoughtfully. "When our parents died, I think he saw it as freedom, in a way. Freedom to seek the life he'd always wanted." "And you stayed behind," Quinn observed quietly. "I had my teaching position, my friends. Boston was all I knew." Emma stared into the fire. "I thought he was being reckless, running off to the wilderness. Now I wonder if he was the brave one." "And now you're here," Lily said. "Following in his footsteps after all." Emma nodded slowly. "Though not by choice, exactly." "What happened?" Quinn asked, his voice gentle. "In Boston, I mean. You don't have to tell us if you'd rather not." Perhaps it was the campfire, creating a circle of intimacy in the vast darkness. Perhaps it was being on her brother's land, feeling closer to him than she had in years. Whatever the reason, Emma found herself wanting to unburden herself of the secret she'd carried west. "I was teaching at a girls' academy," she began, her eyes on the dancing flames. "The headmaster's son, Richard Pembroke, had recently returned from university. He began calling at the school, ostensibly to visit his father, but I soon realized his attentions were directed at me." She took a steadying breath. "His advances became increasingly forward. When I firmly rejected him, he became vindictive." Quinn's expression darkened. "What did he do?" "He spread rumors, terrible, false accusations about my character and conduct. In Boston society, even the suggestion of impropriety is enough to ruin a woman. The school dismissed me to avoid scandal. Former friends crossed the street rather than greet me." The bitterness of the memory still had the power to sting. When Hank's letter arrived with news of his land purchase, I had already decided to leave Boston. His death only confirmed my decision. Silence fell around the campfire. Lily reached over to squeeze Emma's hand in wordless support. Quinn's face was hard in the firelight. "This man, he faced no consequences?" Emma gave a humorless laugh. "His family is wealthy and influential. Who would take the word of a spinster schoolteacher over his?" "It's not right," Quinn said, his voice tight with anger on her behalf. "No, it isn't," Emma agreed. "But in coming here, I've realized something. In Boston, a woman's reputation is her only currency. Here," she gestured to the vast landscape around them. "Here, perhaps I can be judged by what I build, what I contribute, rather than by gossip and innuendo." "You can," Lily assured her warmly. "People out here care more about whether you can weather a blizzard or help with a difficult calving than about your past." "Not everyone," Quinn cautioned. "There's still talk, still judgment. But there's also more freedom to prove yourself through actions rather than appearances." As the fire burned lower and the stars wheeled overhead, their conversation turned to lighter topics. Lily's stories of her courtship with her minor husband, Quinn's tales of breaking particularly stubborn horses, Emma's misadventures teaching proper young ladies who would rather discuss fashion than geography. When finally they settled into their bedrolls, Lily between Quinn and Emma as propriety demanded, Emma lay awake listening to the unfamiliar night sounds, the rustle of wind through grass, the occasional call of a coyote, the soft breathing of her companions. Her gaze drifted to Quinn's sleeping form, his features relaxed in slumber, one arm flung above his head. There was an honesty about him that drew her, a straightforwardness that seemed rare and precious after the deceptions of Boston society. Here was a man who said what he meant and meant what he said, who looked at horses and people alike with the same clear-eyed assessment. What would it be like to be seen by him, truly seen and valued, not as Hank's sister or a Boston schoolteacher, but simply as Emma? The question followed her into dreams where she stood on the plateau by the creek, watching the walls of a cabin rise around her, Quinn's steady hands guiding the logs into place, building something that might last. Morning brought dew-wet grass and a sky washed clean by dawn. Quinn was already tending the fire when Emma emerged from her bedroll, his hair damp from washing in the creek. "Coffee," he offered, holding out a tin cup. Thank you. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, and Emma was suddenly, acutely aware of her rumpled appearance. Her hair loosely braided for sleep, her dress creased from travel. Quinn didn't seem to notice. Sleep well. Better than I expected. There's something peaceful about this place. His eyes warmed. That's how I knew Hank had found something special. Most parcels are just land. This one feels like home somehow. The simple observation struck Emma deeply. It did feel like home, in a way Boston never had. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying, because if she acknowledged this feeling, she would have to decide what to do about it. Lily joined them, yawning and stretching. Lord, I haven't slept on the ground in ages. My back is reminding me I'm not 18 anymore. She accepted a cup of coffee from Quinn with gratitude. So, Emma, what do you think of your inheritance in the daylight? Emma looked out over the valley, golden in the morning sun. I think my brother saw possibilities here that most people would miss. And do you see them too? Quinn asked quietly. Before she could answer, the crack of a rifle shot echoed across the valley. Quinn was on his feet instantly, his hand going to the pistol at his hip. Get down, he ordered, scanning the ridgeline. Both of you. Emma and Lily crouched by the remains of the fire, hearts pounding. Another shot rang out, closer this time. Who would be shooting? Emma whispered. Quinn's expression was grim. Not sure. Could be hunters. Could be someone who doesn't like finding people on what they consider their range. A man's voice called from beyond the ridge. Hello, the camp. Quinn relaxed slightly, but kept his hand near his weapon. Hello, he called back. Identify yourself. Two riders appeared on the ridge. One an older man with a gray beard and battered hat. The other younger, perhaps 30, with a rifle resting across his saddle. This is Quentin Young, the older man announced as they approached. My son Jacob and I have grazing rights in this valley. Quinn stepped forward. Quinn Yates, from Henderson's Broken Spoke Ranch. These ladies are Emma Banning and Lily Roberts. His voice was polite but firm. Miss Banning holds the deed to this land. Her brother Henry purchased it legally last year. The older man frowned, dismounting with the stiffness of age. Deed? There's been some mistake. We've been running cattle here for 3 seasons with Henderson's blessing. Emma rose, brushing dust from her skirt. My brother bought this land 8 months ago, Mr. Young. I have the documentation. Young removed his hat, revealing a sun-spotted pate. His weathered face registered surprise. You're Henry Banning's sister? We heard he'd passed. Terrible business, that fever. His expression softened slightly. Never met him myself, but Henderson spoke well of him. Did you know he owned this land? Quinn asked. Young exchanged a glance with his son, who remained mounted, his expression unreadable. No, sir, I did not. Henderson told us this was open range still, unclaimed by the government. We've been paying him a small fee for grazing rights. Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Mr. Henderson told you this land was available after my brother had purchased it? Appears so, ma'am. Young twisted his hat in his hands. I mean no disrespect to your brother's memory or your claim. We're honest ranchers, not squatters. Quinn's jaw tightened. I think there's been a misunderstanding somewhere. Henderson isn't the type to sell grazing rights to land he doesn't control. Unless he didn't know Hank had purchased it, Lily suggested. Or unless. She didn't finish the thought, but it hung in the air, the possibility that something more deliberate was at play. Emma made a decision. Mr. Young, I have no immediate plans to develop this property. Until I decide what to do with it, you're welcome to continue grazing your cattle here for the agreed-upon fee. Relief washed over the older man's face. That's mighty generous, Miss Banning. I'd be pleased to pay you directly instead of Henderson. That would be acceptable, Emma agreed. Perhaps you could call at the Broken Spoke next week to discuss terms? Young nodded enthusiastically. We surely will. And we'll spread the word that this land has a proper owner now. He remounted with a grunt of effort. Sorry about the shooting. We thought you might be rustlers or that Blackfoot hunting party that came through last month. After the Youngs departed, Emma turned to Quinn, whose expression had grown increasingly troubled. You're worried, she observed. Something doesn't add up, he admitted. Hank never mentioned buying land, not even to me. And Henderson continuing to collect grazing fees on property he didn't control. He shook his head. I don't like it. Could it be an honest mistake? Lily asked. Possibly. But Quinn didn't sound convinced. We should head back. I want to speak with Henderson about this. As they broke camp and prepared to ride, Emma found herself torn between the beauty of the land that was now hers and the unease stirred by the morning's encounter. If there was something suspicious about her brother's land purchase or his silence about it, how would she ever uncover the truth? What are you thinking? Quinn asked softly, helping her mount. Emma met his concerned gaze. That I came here looking for a fresh start? Not a mystery. But it seems I've found both. His hand lingered on her arm. Whatever's going on, you don't have to face it alone. The simple promise warmed her more than it should have. Thank you, Quinn. As they rode away from Wolf Creek Valley, Emma looked back once at the place where a home might have stood. Despite the questions raised by the Young's appearance, she couldn't shake the feeling that she belonged here. Not in the foreman's cabin at Broken Spoke Ranch or in a boarding house in Helena, but here on her brother's land. Her land now, and perhaps, someday her home. The return journey to Broken Spoke Ranch was quieter than their outward trip. Quinn rode slightly ahead, his shoulders tense, his usual easy manner replaced by watchful alertness. Emma and Lily exchanged occasional glances but kept their conversation light, both aware of the unresolved questions hanging over them. As the ranch buildings came into view in the late afternoon, Emma felt a curious mix of relief and trepidation. She had come to see this place as a temporary haven, but now she wondered if there were undercurrents here she didn't understand. Mrs. Henderson greeted them at the main house, her face creased with concern. Thank goodness you're back safely. There's been trouble. Quinn dismounted quickly. What kind of trouble? Roberts found one of our best bulls dead this morning, shot clean through the head. And there was a note pinned to the corral post. She lowered her voice. A warning to mind our business or lose more than livestock. Lily gasped. Jack wasn't hurt. No, dear, he's fine. Out with the hands trying to track whoever did it. Mrs. Henderson's sharp eyes moved from Quinn to Emma. Did something happen out at Wolf Creek? Quinn briefly recounted their encounter with the Youngs and the confusion over the grazing rights. Mrs. Henderson's expression grew increasingly troubled. Mr. Henderson needs to hear this. He's in his study. She gestured for Quinn to follow her inside, then turned to Emma. You should come too, Miss Banning. This concerns your property. Emma handed Daisy's reins to a stable boy and followed them into the house, her heart beating quickly. She had never met Mr. Henderson, who had been away on business in Helena since her arrival. Now she would be meeting him under the cloud of potential deception. Walter Henderson proved to be a substantial man in his 60s. With a shock of white hair and the ruddy complexion of someone who spent more time outdoors than in. He rose from behind his desk as they entered, his expression grave. Miss Banning. He greeted her with a slight bow. I regret we're meeting under these circumstances. Please, sit down. He turned to Quinn. Yates. Clara tells me there's been some confusion about the Banning property. Quinn remained standing, his posture respectful but firm. Mr. Young claims you've been collecting grazing fees for land that belongs to Miss Banning. Henderson sighed heavily, lowering himself back into his chair. Not collecting, returning. Young paid for seasonal grazing rights last spring. When I learned Hank had purchased the property, I tried to refund Young's money, but he'd already moved his herd up to Wolf Creek. Emma leaned forward. You knew my brother owned that land? Of course. I helped him arrange the purchase. Henderson's bushy eyebrows drew together. Didn't you find my letter with his effects? I wrote explaining the situation after he passed. Emma and Quinn exchanged glances. There was no letter, Emma said. Only the deed itself. Henderson's frown deepened. That's concerning. I specifically instructed Roberts to include it with Hank's things. A cold feeling settled in Emma's stomach. Mr. Henderson, we encountered the Youngs this morning. They fired warning shots, believing we might be rustlers. Or that Blackfoot hunting party, Quinn added. Henderson's head snapped up. What Blackfoot party? Young mentioned them, said they came through the valley last month. Impossible, Henderson declared flatly. The Blackfoot haven't hunted that far south in years. They're all on the reservation now. His expression hardened. Young was lying. The pieces began to align in Emma's mind. The missing letter, the dead bull, the veiled threat. You think the Youngs are behind the warning? Henderson nodded grimly. It fits. Quentin Young has had his eye on that valley for years. When Hank bought it legally out from under him, he wasn't pleased. But why target the ranch? Quinn asked. Why not go directly after the property? Because an unoccupied property with an absentee owner is easier to claim through squatters' rights than one actively defended by a neighboring ranch, Henderson explained. As long as we were aware of Miss Banning's ownership and watching out for her interests, Young couldn't simply move in. Emma felt a chill at the calculation behind such a scheme, and the letter explaining all this conveniently disappeared. Henderson's expression was troubled. Miss Banning, I fear someone here at the ranch may be working with Young. Someone who had access to your brother's effects before they were given to you. The implication hung in the air that someone at Broken Spoke Ranch, someone who had known Hank, might be complicit in trying to steal his land. Quinn's face had gone hard as stone. Roberts was responsible for gathering Hank's things after the funeral. Jack? Clara Henderson looked shocked. Surely not. He's been with us for 15 years. Where was he when we arrived back at the ranch just now? Quinn asked quietly. Supposedly tracking whoever shot the bull, wasn't he? Emma felt sick at the thought of betrayal reaching so deep to the man who had helped arrange her meetings with local families about teaching, who had been kind to her since her arrival. We shouldn't jump to conclusions, she cautioned, though her mind was racing with suspicions. What matters now is protecting the property. Henderson nodded approvingly. Well said, Miss Banning. The immediate question is what to do about the Youngs. They know now that you're aware of your ownership, and that we're supporting your claim. Which makes them desperate, Quinn added. Desperate men make mistakes, or become more dangerous. I should go to the sheriff, Emma suggested. Sheriff Travis is in Helena until next week, Henderson replied. And without proof, there's little he could do anyway. Quinn straightened. Then we need proof. And the best way to get it is to catch them in the act. What are you suggesting? Mrs. Henderson asked warily. A trap, Quinn said. We let word spread that Miss Banning is returning to Boston, that she found frontier life too harsh and is selling the property. The Youngs will make their move, and we'll be waiting. Emma started to protest, but Henderson was already nodding thoughtfully. It could work. Young is smart but impatient. If he thinks Miss Banning is leaving, he'll want to secure his claim before any other buyers appear. It's too dangerous, Emma objected. These men have already killed livestock and made threats. Quinn turned to her, his expression softening. Not if we're prepared. We'll have men concealed on the property, ready to intervene at the first sign of trouble. And where will I be during all this? Emma demanded. Safely tucked away at the ranch while others risk themselves for my property? A smile tugged at Quinn's mouth. Actually, I was thinking you'd be the bait. 2 days later, Emma found herself once again at Wolf Creek Valley, this time accompanied by Quinn and 3 trusted ranch hands. They had arrived openly, making camp in the same spot as before, deliberately visible to anyone watching from the surrounding hills. According to the plan, Emma would appear to be taking a final look at her property before returning east. Quinn would ride to Helena the next day, ostensibly to arrange for the sale, leaving Emma with minimal protection, an irresistible target for anyone wanting to intimidate her into abandoning her claim. Except Quinn wouldn't actually be going to Helena. He and the other hands would withdraw only far enough to appear gone, then circle back after dark to position themselves around the valley, waiting for the Youngs to make their move. As evening approached, Emma sat beside the campfire, outwardly calm despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. She wore one of her simpler dresses, her hair braided and pinned up beneath a practical bonnet. Beside her, Quinn checked his revolver for the 3rd time, his face grim in the firelight. You don't have to go through with this, he said quietly. We can find another way. Emma shook her head. This is my land, Quinn. I won't be frightened away from it. His eyes met hers, filled with admiration and something deeper that made her breath catch. You're braver than most men I know. Not brave, she corrected. Just stubborn. A family trait, apparently. Quinn smiled, reaching out to cover her hand with his. Emma, when this is over, hey, lovebirds, called Jenkins, one of the ranch hands. Sun's almost down. Time to put on our show for anyone watching. Quinn withdrew his hand reluctantly. He's right. We should be visible arguing about me leaving. They stood and moved a few paces from the fire, positioning themselves where they would be silhouetted against the flames. Ready? Quinn asked softly. Emma nodded, then raised her voice. You can't leave me here alone. What if those men come back? Quinn played his part perfectly, his voice carrying across the valley. I told you, I'll be back tomorrow afternoon with the lawyer. The sooner we get the sale papers drawn up, the sooner you can return to Boston. And if something happens before then, Emma demanded, impressed despite herself at Quinn's acting ability. Nothing will happen, he replied dismissively. Young and his son are all talk. Besides, Jenkins and Miller will be here. He gestured toward the two hands sitting by the fire, deliberately allowing his voice to drop as if not wanting them to hear. Just stay in camp and you'll be fine. They continued the performance for several minutes, their argument growing more heated until Quinn stomped off toward the horses, making a show of checking his saddle for the morning ride. As darkness fell, the ranch hands made a point of drinking coffee laced with whiskey by the fire, becoming progressively louder and more careless, the picture of incompetent guards. By the time they settled into their bedrolls, the scene had been set. Emma was alone with two supposedly drunk and inattentive protectors, while Quinn would be leaving at first light for Helena. Any observers would believe she was vulnerable. Quinn waited until the fire had burned low before slipping silently to her side. I'll be within shouting distance all night, he whispered. If anything happens before morning, signal with 3 shots from this. He pressed a small derringer into her hand. But I don't think they'll move until after I leave. The weight of the weapon was unfamiliar but reassuring. I know how to use it. My father insisted both Hank and I learn. Quinn's eyebrows rose in surprise. Your father was a forward-thinking man. He believed in being prepared. Emma tucked the derringer into her pocket. Quinn, be careful tomorrow. If Roberts is involved with the Youngs, I'll watch my back, he promised. His hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing gently. Try to get some sleep. Tomorrow will be challenging enough. But sleep proved elusive. Emma lay awake, listening to the night sounds and the soft breathing of the men around her. Her mind kept returning to Quinn's unfinished sentence by the fire. Emma, when this is over, what had he been about to say? And what did she want him to say? The questions followed her into uneasy dreams, where she stood on her land while shadowy figures circled like wolves, and Quinn called to her from a distance she couldn't cross. Morning brought a convincing performance of farewells. Quinn rode out with much apparent reluctance, visible to anyone watching from the hills. Jenkins and Miller settled into their roles as careless guards, deliberately wandering away from camp for long periods, leaving Emma conspicuously alone. The hours crept by with excruciating slowness. Emma busied herself with small tasks, gathering firewood, preparing a simple meal, writing in her journal. All the while, her senses were heightened, aware of every sound, every movement in the surrounding landscape. By mid-afternoon, the tension was nearly unbearable. Where were the Youngs? Had they seen through the ruse? Or worse, had they somehow intercepted Quinn and the others? As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, Emma was beginning to think the plan had failed. Then she heard it, the distant thunder of approaching hoofbeats, not from one horse, but several. Jenkins appeared from where he'd been lounging by the creek. Stay calm, Miss Banning. Remember the plan. We're right here. She nodded, heart racing as she positioned herself by the fire, deliberately vulnerable, but with the derringer readily accessible in her pocket. 4 riders crested the ridge, the Youngs, father and son, accompanied by 2 rough-looking men Emma didn't recognize. They approached the camp at a deliberate pace, spreading out slightly as they drew nearer. Miss Banning, the elder Young called, tipping his hat with mock politeness. Surprised to find you still here. Heard you were heading back east. Emma stood her ground, summoning every ounce of composure she possessed. Not until my business is concluded, Mr. Young. My representative has gone to Helena to arrange the sale. Young dismounted, his movements casual, but his eyes cold and calculating. Sale, is it? That's interesting. Might I ask who the buyer is? That's not yet determined, Emma replied. There are several interested parties. Young's son Jacob remained mounted, his hand resting near his holstered pistol. The other 2 men had positioned themselves to flank the camp, effectively cutting off any escape route. Well, now, that is a shame, Young said, stepping closer. Because my son and I have our hearts set on this particular piece of land. Been running our cattle here for years, you see. Feels almost like it's ours already. Emma lifted her chin. The deed says otherwise, Mr. Young. A dangerous smile spread across the older man's weathered face. Deeds can be lost, Miss Banning. People too, sometimes. Especially city folk who don't understand the dangers of this country. Jenkins took a step forward. Now hold on, Young. There's no call for threats. Stay out of this, cowboy, Young snapped. This is between me and the lady. His eyes narrowed as he turned back to Emma. I'm prepared to be generous, Miss Banning. $500 cash for you to sign over the deed and forget you ever owned this land. Emma's hand slipped into her pocket, fingers closing around the derringer. This land was my brother's dream, Mr. Young. It's not for sale, to you or anyone else. Young's false affability vanished. Your brother's dead, girl. And you will be too if you don't wise up. He gestured to the men flanking the camp. These fellows aren't as patient as I am. One word from me, and they'll make sure you never leave this valley. That would be unwise, Emma said, struggling to keep her voice steady. Mr. Yates knows exactly where I am. If anything happens to me, he'll come looking for you. Young laughed harshly. Yates? That saddle tramp won't be looking for anyone. He turned to one of his companions. Show her, Daniels. The man reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a familiar item, Quinn's hat, with a dark stain that could only be blood marring the crown. Emma's heart stuttered in her chest. No, she whispered. Found him on the trail to Helena, Young said with cruel satisfaction. Put up quite a fight, but 4 against 1 ain't sporting odds. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt beneath Emma's feet. Quinn, captured, possibly dead. The plan in ruins. She was truly alone now, facing men who would kill without compunction to get what they wanted. Then, from somewhere deep inside, a cold clarity emerged. She was Henry Banning's sister. She hadn't traveled 2,000 miles to be intimidated by men like these. I don't believe you, she said, her voice stronger. You're bluffing, Mr. Young. Young's eyes hardened. Believe what you want. You've got one chance to save yourself. Sign over the deed now, or join Yates wherever we dumped him. Emma withdrew the derringer from her pocket, aiming it steadily at Young's chest. I think not. For a moment, surprise registered on the man's face, quickly replaced by amusement. A ladylike little gun for a ladylike little threat. That pea-shooter won't stop all of us, Miss Banning. It doesn't need to. Came a familiar voice from behind the group. It just needs to stop you, Young. Quinn stepped from the shadows of the trees, his rifle trained on Young's back. Relief flooded through Emma, so powerful she nearly staggered. Young froze. Yates, you're supposed to be dead. Sorry to disappoint. Quinn's voice was cold. Daniels and his friend tried their best, but they're terrible shots, and even worse liars. As if on cue, Henderson and 3 more ranch hands emerged from concealment around the clearing, weapons drawn. Jacob Young reached for his pistol, but Jenkins was faster, his revolver already aimed. I wouldn't, Jenkins advised calmly. For a tense moment, it seemed Jacob might try anyway. Then his hand dropped away from his weapon. Smart choice, Quinn said. He turned to Young. It's over. We heard every word. Threatening a woman's life is a hanging offense in this territory. Young's face contorted with rage. It's her word against mine. And what jury would believe some Boston schoolmarm over an established rancher? They'll believe this, Emma said, reaching into her bodice and withdrawing a small object, a detective's pinfire recording device that Henderson had procured from Helena. Every word, Mr. Young. Every threat. The color drained from Young's face as understanding dawned. They had anticipated his every move, set a trap within a trap, and he had walked into it with blind confidence. Take their weapons, Quinn instructed the ranch hands. We're escorting them to Sheriff Travis and Helena. He crossed to Emma's side, his eyes searching her face. Are you all right? She nodded, the derringer still steady in her hand. Your hat. A necessary prop, he explained softly. I'm sorry for the deception. As the ranch hands disarmed and bound the Youngs and their companions, Emma finally allowed her composure to crack. Her hand trembled as she lowered the derringer. I thought you were dead, she whispered. Quinn gently took the weapon from her fingers. It takes more than the likes of them to stop me from coming back to you. The simple declaration, spoken in the aftermath of danger, carried a weight that neither of them could ignore. Emma looked up into Quinn's face, seeing there a promise that had nothing to do with land or protection and everything to do with a future neither of them had anticipated. Quinn, she began, but Henderson interrupted, approaching with Young's confiscated pistol. Miss Banning, you showed remarkable courage today. Your brother would have been proud. He glanced between her and Quinn with knowing eyes. We should get these men to Helena before nightfall. The explanations and celebrations can wait until we return. As they prepared to depart, Emma took one last look around the valley. Her valley, now truly hers in a way it hadn't been before. She had defended it, faced fear for it, perhaps even found a future on it. She mounted Daisy, settling into the saddle with a new confidence. Whatever came next, whether teaching the children of the territory or building something permanent on this land, she would face it with the same determination that had brought her through today's confrontation. And she wouldn't face it alone. Of that, she was suddenly certain. 2 months later, Emma stood on the porch of the small cabin that now occupied the plateau overlooking Wolf Creek. The summer sun warmed the newly cut logs, filling the air with the scent of pine. Behind her, the single room was simply but comfortably furnished. A bed with a colorful quilt, a table with 4 chairs, shelves lined with books she had brought from Boston. So much had changed since that day when the Youngs were taken to Helena. Jack Roberts had indeed been working with them, tempted by the promise of a share in the valuable valley once Emma had been driven away. His betrayal had stunned the Hendersons, but justice had been swift. The Youngs and Roberts now awaited trial in Helena, while Emma had set about making her brother's dream a reality. With Quinn's help and the support of neighboring ranchers, she had built this cabin and established a small but growing herd of cattle. 3 days a week, she rode a circuit of nearby ranches, teaching their children in their own homes while plans for a proper schoolhouse in the settlement progressed. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention. Quinn approached on his bay gelding, leading a second horse, a pretty sorrel mare with a white blaze. He dismounted with his usual easy grace, tipping back his hat to smile at her. "What do you think?" he asked, gesturing to the mare. "Henderson bred her himself. Says she's got the sweetest temperament of any horse he's raised." Emma descended the steps, approaching the beautiful animal. "She's lovely. But why? Daisy's getting older, and with your teaching circuit expanding, you need a reliable mount." Quinn's expression grew serious. "I want to know you're safe on those rides between ranches." The concern in his voice warmed her. Over the past months, their relationship had deepened into something neither of them had expected, a partnership built on mutual respect and growing affection. Quinn had spent every free moment helping with the cabin and the small herd, never asking for anything in return except the pleasure of her company. "Thank you," she said, stroking the mare's velvet muzzle. "She's perfect." Quinn tied both horses to the hitching post and joined Emma on the porch. "The cabin looks good. Jenkins did a fine job with the roof." "He did," Emma agreed, though I suspect his eagerness had more to do with Mrs. Jenkins' determination to see me properly settled than any particular interest in carpentry. Quinn laughed. "The whole territory seems invested in your welfare these days." It was true. Since standing her ground against the Youngs, Emma had found herself embraced by the community in ways she'd never experienced in Boston. Neighboring women brought preserves and quilts. Ranchers offered advice and occasionally calves to strengthen her small herd. Children eagerly awaited her teaching visits. "I never expected to find such acceptance here," she admitted. "You earned it," Quinn said simply. "Not many would have had the courage to do what you did." Emma turned to look out over her land, the cattle grazing peacefully in the valley, the creek catching the afternoon sun. "I had help." Quinn moved to stand beside her, his shoulder barely touching hers. "Emma, there's something I've been wanting to ask you." The serious note in his voice made her heart quicken. She turned to face him fully. "Yes." He took a deep breath, his usually confident manner giving way to endearing nervousness. "These past months, working alongside you, watching you build something from nothing." He hesitated. "I've never met anyone like you. A woman with the education and refinement of the East, but the courage and determination it takes to survive out here." Emma felt a blush rising in her cheeks. "Quinn," he gently took her hands in his. "I know I'm just a ranch hand. I don't have much to offer except my hands and my heart. But if you'd consider—" He swallowed hard. "What I'm trying to say is, I love you, Emma Banning. And if you'll have me, I'd like to build a life with you, right here on this land that meant so much to your brother." Tears pricked at Emma's eyes. "You're not just anything, Quinn Yates. You're the most honorable, kind, and capable man I've ever known." She squeezed his hands. "And I love you too." The joy that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Is that a yes?" Emma laughed through her tears. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." Quinn gathered her into his arms, his kiss gentle at first, then deepening with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "Your brother would approve, I think," he murmured. "He always said you deserved someone who would appreciate your spirit, not try to tame it." "Hank talked about me?" Emma asked, surprised. Quinn nodded. "Often. He was so proud of you, of your independence and determination." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "He once told me that if he ever found a woman with half your character, he'd marry her on the spot." Emma smiled through fresh tears. "Then I think he would be very happy about this." As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, Quinn and Emma stood together on the porch of the cabin that would now be their home. Below them, the valley stretched in golden splendor, no longer just a piece of land, but the foundation of a future neither of them had imagined when Emma first stepped down from that stagecoach with nothing but hope in her heart. Hope had been enough to begin. Love would be enough to build upon. And together, they would make Hank's dream, now their dream, a reality that would stand for generations to come.